Hey guys, let's start with the story tonight. A battle of faded ink that spans 200 years. A young scholar fights against memories erased by power and pursues the breath buried by the empire. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And tell me in the comments where you started tuning in and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see people from all over the world join us. Constant temperature of 20 degrees Celsius, humidity 55%. The air hung heavy with the musty scent unique to old paper and the cool fragrance of cedar insect repellent. I had been sitting in front of these file boxes labeled 1812 to 1813, corroded and damaged for 3 hours, my fingertips growing stiff beneath the latex gloves. Most of these documents were logistical records of Napoleon's Grande Armée. The edges of the paper frayed like chewed dead leaves, and the ink blurred into faint gray splotches, resembling a group of ghosts trapped in time. Leclerc, these corroded files only require basic deacidification per regulations. Don't waste too much effort on them. Maxime, the archivist, pushed his cart past, the metal wheels scraping a monotonous sound across the floor. They were soaked in swamp water back then and have been sitting in storage for 200 years. They're practically pulp now. I nodded, but my gaze never left the letter in my hand. It was a stack of folded cream-colored stationery, its edges slightly curled, the surface unnaturally smooth, unlike the other files, which were crisscrossed with fiber cracks. What was stranger still, no matter how closely I examined it with a precision magnifying glass, the paper appeared completely blank, as if never written on. But intuition, the kind honed by 7 years immersed in old documents, told me something was hidden here. Taking advantage of Maxime's absence to organize the accession records, I pulled a portable ultraviolet lamp from my drawer. This was a violation. The archive's rules explicitly prohibited irradiating cultural relics with intense light without permission. But the moment the purple beam penetrated the letter, I forgot to breathe. Beneath the pale blue fluorescence, lines of faded French emerged like schools of fish surfacing from the depths, fragmented and intermittent. Candies to soothe, children's laughter, the sky legion overhead. The swamp needs no tombstones. They call it the Emperor's Grace. The words abruptly cut off at the edge of the page, as if the writer had been suddenly deprived of their pen. Adjusting the lamp's angle, I discovered something even more startling tucked between the pages. A tiny microfilm photograph, no larger than a fingernail. When magnified, the image sharpened. A soldier in Napoleon's army uniform, standing rigidly, holding a balloon made of colored cloth. A small figure seemed to hang from the balloon's string. The drawing was childish, clearly the work of a child, yet the paint, even through the microfilm, glowed with an eerie dark red hue. "What are you looking at?" Maxime's voice suddenly sounded behind me. I fumbled to turn off the UV lamp, my heart pounding. He leaned in, his eyes fixing on the blank letter, his expression growing complex. "Leclerc, some files are like bodies buried in snow, better left undisturbed forever." His fingers tapped lightly on the file box, the label AX 1812-10, standing out sharply. AX stood for abandoned, 1812 the year, and 10. I suddenly recalled that during Napoleon's 1812 invasion of Russia, he had indeed commanded a unit codenamed the 10th Army, which vanished without a trace after the Battle of Berezina. The official account stated they had all perished in blizzards and Russian ambushes. But the words before me told an entirely different story. The cold wind off the Berezina River cut like a knife across Pierre Valentine's cheeks. He pulled his scarf tighter, his exposed eyelashes already crusted with frost. The campfire flickered precariously in the storm, casting light on the soldiers' exhausted faces. Their uniforms caked in mud and blood, their boots worn through to purple, frost-bitten toes. Lieutenant Valentine, a messenger's voice pierced the wind, galloping closer on horseback. The horse's breath curled into fleeting clouds of steam. Colonel's orders. Your 3rd Battalion is to serve as the rearguard, covering the main army's crossing. It is an honorable mission. Pierre took the order, the parchment nearly crumbling in his frozen fingers. An honorable rearguard, he knew exactly what those words meant. In the Grande Army's retreat, rearguard units were always sacrificial lambs, delaying pursuers to buy time for the Emperor and the main force. He thought of the letter his wife Marie had sent before his departure, telling him their young daughter Lucy could now draw soldiers, drawings of her father holding a red balloon. "Lieutenant, the quartermaster's here." Private Luke's voice pulled him from his thoughts. The 18-year-old, still boyish in face, always kept a photo of his family close to his chest. Pierre turned to see Quartermaster Lemur directing soldiers to distribute supply crates, an overly warm smile plastered on his face. "His Imperial Majesty cares deeply for the morale of every brave warrior," Lemur said, shoving a heavy tin box into Pierre's hands. The box bore the distinct Imperial B emblem. "Special rations for you. Compressed biscuits, spirits, and this." He opened the lid to reveal candies wrapped in colored paper. B emblazoned candies. "His Majesty says they will remind you of the sweetness of home." "Home." Luke leaned in, his eyes lighting up. "Can I save one for my sister? She loves sweets more than anything." Lemur patted him on the shoulder, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Of course, young man. As long as you hold your position, your family will be proud." As he turned to leave, Pierre noticed a strange pale yellow powder on his sleeve. Neither snow nor mud. The soldiers passed the candy boxes around eagerly, the cloying sweetness seemingly easing the cold and fear. Pierre peeled open a candy and popped it into his mouth. The sweetness was unusually intense, almost bitter, as if laced with something else. He looked toward the Berezina River, where the water was already starting to freeze, the wind swirling snowflakes that blurred the outline of the main army in the distance. "Lieutenant, when do we march?" Luke asked, carefully tucking a candy into his pocket next to his sister's photo. Pierre tightened his grip on the order, the words on the parchment seeming to twist and distort in the storm. "We leave before dawn," he said, his gaze fixed on the pitch-black night sky. "We must buy the main force as much time as possible." That night, Pierre had a dream. He was walking hand in hand with Lucy on the streets of Paris, his daughter clutching a red balloon. Suddenly, the balloon slipped its string, soaring into the sky and transforming into a giant silhouette of Napoleon, casting a shadow over the entire city. Lucy's cries faded into the distance as he reached out, grasping only a handful of cold snow. The apartment door hung ajar, the lock showing signs of forced entry. Standing in the doorway, my blood rushed to my head, and the file copies in my hand nearly slipped to the floor. Before leaving the archives the previous day, I had organized the text restored under UV light into notes, making a copy to take home while leaving the original in the repair room safe as required. The room was in shambles. Books pulled from shelves and scattered across the floor, drawers thrown open. The computer shut down and its power cord disconnected. I rushed to the desk. The copy of my notes was gone. Strangely, my wallet, watch, and even the camera left in plain sight remained untouched. The thief's target had been precise, only my research notes. After calling the police, they took a perfunctory statement, concluding it was a targeted burglary. Could it be a rival researcher? The young officer asked casually, his eyes glancing over the Napoleon War map hanging on my wall. I didn't answer. A rival wouldn't steal an unfinished research note. They wanted to stop me from digging further. Maxime's warning suddenly echoed in my ears. Some graves shouldn't be opened. It hadn't been a caution, it had been a threat. Back at the archives, I checked the original documents in the safe first. The letter was still there, the faded words visible under UV light, but something felt off. Maxime stood in the repair room doorway, his expression grim. "Leclerc, did you use the UV lamp? I just wanted to see if restoration was possible," I replied, keeping my voice as calm as I could. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, and lowered his voice. "I've worked here for 30 years. I've seen many young people like you, curious, thinking they can uncover some great secret. But you need to understand, France needs heroes, needs the glorious history of Napoleon to unite its people. Some truths are more hurtful than lies. Truth is truth, whether it hurts or not," I retorted. "What really happened to the 10th Army? What do the Swamp and Sky Legion in those words mean?" Maxime's face paled. He pulled a slip of paper from his pocket and placed it in front of me. "This is the last thing I can do for you. Emily Dupont, a folklorist. Her great-grandfather was a soldier in the 10th Army, Jean Dupont. Go see her. She might be able to tell you something. But remember, know when to stop." Emily Dupont's home was in a small town outside Paris, a typical French country house surrounded by a garden of roses. Even in late autumn, a few blooms clung stubbornly to the bushes. The door was answered by an elderly woman with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, her eyes sharp as an eagle's. "I knew you'd come," she said, stepping aside to let me in. A faded portrait of a soldier hung in the living room. Maxime called. He's always like this, wanting to atone, but too afraid to face the consequences. She retrieved an old wooden box from her study and opened it, revealing a tin toy soldier. Dressed in the 10th Army uniform, it was crudely made but well preserved. Engraved in tiny letters on the base were the words, "10th Army, never forgotten." "This was passed down from my great-grandfather, Jean Dupont," Emily said, running her fingers over the engraving. "He was a survivor of the 10th Army, but he never spoke much about what happened. Only on his deathbed did he tell my grandfather that the 10th Army wasn't defeated by the Russians. They were disposed of by their own side." Disposed of? I seized on the word. What does that mean? Great-grandfather said they were led to a vast swamp. Emily's voice trembled. The soldiers began to feel drowsy and hallucinate, and the officers in command acted strangely. He said there were flying monsters watching them from the sky, dropping fire and driving them deeper into the swamp. He survived by hiding behind a dead horse, then was captured by the Russians and sent to Siberia. I pulled out my phone and showed her the microfilm photo of the child's drawing. "Have you seen this?" A soldier holding a balloon. Emily's eyes widened. She took a yellowed letter from the wooden box. On it was the same drawing, larger and clearer. Great-grandfather sent this from Siberia. He said he found it on a dead officer. The officer's name was Pierre Valentin. Pierre Valentin. The name struck like a bolt of lightning, illuminating my muddled thoughts. I suddenly remembered seeing that name in the archive's casualty lists, marked as killed in action at the Battle of Berezina, November 1812. But now it was clear, like the faded words on the letter, that list had been a lie. The blizzard raged worse than anticipated, and Pierre's 3rd Battalion had strayed from their intended route. The engineer acting as their guide claimed it was to avoid Russian patrols, but Pierre sensed something was wrong. They had been marching in the storm for 3 days, the landscape growing increasingly desolate, the ground turning muddy, and the air thick with the stench of rotting water plants. "Lieutenant, I'm so sleepy," Luke said, rubbing his eyes and stumbling slightly. "I slept for hours last night, but I still can't keep my eyes open." Pierre felt the same. Since setting out, the soldiers had grown increasingly drowsy, some even nodding off while marching. Stranger still, hallucinations had begun. Some spoke of seeing Parisian streets, others of hearing their families' voices, and it all seemed linked to those be-emblazoned candies. "Stop eating those candies," Pierre told Luke. He'd noticed that the more candies a soldier ate, the more severe their hallucinations became. "But if I don't eat them, I see my mother's face," Luke said, his eyes bloodshot. "She looks like she's crying." The quartermaster said eating the candies would make her happy. Pierre frowned. He opened his own candy box, and a cloying scent wafted out. Beyond the sweetness of sugar, he detected a faint, almond-like bitterness. Suddenly, he remembered the pale yellow powder on Quartermaster Lemur's sleeve. It could be opium, ground into a fine powder and mixed into the candies. As night fell, they set up camp on the edge of the swamp. After lighting the campfire, most of the soldiers curled up in their tents to sleep, leaving only a handful on guard. Pierre couldn't rest. Stepping outside his tent to survey the surroundings, he was suddenly confronted by an eerie glow in the sky. It was a massive, luminous bird, its wings spanning over 10 meters, gliding silently overhead. The light illuminated the ground, casting a giant, cold silhouette of Napoleon. The soldiers were roused from their sleep, streaming out of their tents to stare at the sky in terror. "It's the Emperor's Ghost Legion," someone screamed. "The Emperor is watching us from above." "That's no ghost. It's a hot air balloon," Pierre said calmly. He had seen such devices in Paris used for military reconnaissance. But this one was unusually large, bearing no military insignia. Only that imposing silhouette, like a nightmare hanging overhead. As the balloon passed, a strange metallic wail filled the air, like countless knives slicing through the wind. The soldiers grew agitated, some weeping, others dropping to their knees in prayer. Luke clung tightly to Pierre's arm, his voice trembling. "Lieutenant, are we going to die here? I haven't even seen my sister." Pierre gripped the hilt of his sword, his gaze steady. "No, we won't die here. We are soldiers of France, and we will fight for ourselves." Glancing at the sleeping soldiers, he suddenly understood. This was no mere rearguard mission. It was a carefully orchestrated massacre. The candies, the hallucinations, the glowing balloon, all designed to break their will, to make them march like lambs to their deaths. Late at night, Pierre was awakened by whispered voices. Sneaking out of his tent, he saw two men dressed in engineer uniforms talking. Their sleeves bore no engineer's insignia. Instead, a small, hidden eagle emblem, the mark of the Imperial Secret Police. "How's the acidic ink holding up?" one asked. "Don't worry," the other sneered. "By spring, those documents will be gone forever, just like them. Minister Savary says the 10th Army's very existence was a mistake. They know too much. They must be erased." "Acidic ink? Minister Savary?" Pierre's heart skipped a beat. Savary was Napoleon's confidant, head of the Imperial Secret Police, notorious for his cruelty. He finally realized they weren't on a rearguard mission, they were being executed by their own country. Sneaking back into his tent, he found Luke huddled in the corner, muttering to himself. "Lieutenant, I saw my mother again," Luke said, his eyes vacant. "She called me a coward, said I don't deserve to go home. She said the only way to atone is to die in the swamp." Pierre knelt beside him, taking his cold, trembling hand. "Don't listen to those voices, Luke," he said gently. "That's not your mother speaking. It's their trick. We have to survive to get back to our families." That night, Pierre found an abandoned manual on the edge of the swamp. The cover bore no markings, but inside were diagrams. How to use candies and toys to induce guilt and obedience, how to use hot air balloons for psychological intimidation, how to lead troops into prearranged death traps. The last page contained a single line: "Sacrifice is necessary for the stability of the Empire." Pierre tucked the manual into his tunic, his gaze fixed on the dark swamp. He knew they had stumbled into a vast conspiracy, and the only way to survive was to resist. St. Petersburg's winter was colder than Paris's, the wind piercing like ice shards. Standing outside the Military History Institute, I clutched the address Emily had given me tightly. The institute housed a vast collection of Russian military archives from the Napoleonic Wars, among them, perhaps, records of the 10th Army. With the staff's help, I located the file cabinets labeled 1813, French prisoner of war interrogation records. Most of the documents were written in Russian, the paper yellowed and the handwriting scribbled. I flipped through them page by page, my fingers numb with cold. Just as I was about to give up, an interrogation record numbered 734 caught my eye. Dated March 1813, it was labeled Prisoner, Jean Dupont, 10th French Army. I am a soldier of the 10th Army. We were not defeated by the Russians. The record read, the handwriting erratic with fear. They gave us candies laced with something to make us sleep, made us think of our families, made us feel guilty toward the emperor. Then Savary's men came, saying if we walked quietly into the swamp, our families would receive pensions. If we resisted, our families would be sent to prison. They watched us from the sky in hot air balloons, dropping fire to drive us deeper into the swamp. Many fell asleep and walked straight into the swamp, never to emerge. I hid behind a dead horse to avoid being seen. Later, I was captured by the Russians and brought here. At the end of the record, a note in red ink read, "The prisoner died of sudden delirium the following day. Verified." His testimony aligns with fragmented accounts from other captured French soldiers. French intelligence is credible. Jean Dupont, Emily's great-grandfather. His testimony confirmed my suspicions. The 10th Army had been victims of Napoleon's internal purification. But why? What did the 10th Army know that warranted such complete erasure? The day after returning to Paris, I received an anonymous package. No return address, only a bottle of vintage ink and a typed note. Test its fading properties. Rushing back to the archives, I compared the ink to the residue on the letter. Chemical analysis revealed the composition was identical. A special acidic ink that decomposed gradually under specific temperature and humidity conditions, eventually disappearing without a trace, leaving only faint, barely detectable marks. The letters hadn't faded naturally. They had been written with this special ink. The writer had known the words would vanish, yet still chose to write them, racing against time to leave a faint trace of evidence. Who had written them? Pierre Valentine? I examined the letter with the child's drawing again under UV light, noticing a detail I had missed earlier. A dark red stain on the edge. Testing confirmed it was dried blood. This letter had been written with a life. The night of the Great Purge, Pierre had read the phrase in the Psychological Operations Manual. It stated that on the 5th night, the secret police would carry out the final disposal, using fire and psychological terror to drive the remaining soldiers into the swamp. With 2 days left until the purge, Pierre knew he had to act fast. He began secretly contacting soldiers who still retained their clarity, mostly those who had eaten few candies or possessed strong wills. Luke was among them, his sister's photo taped to his chest, his eyes burning with the desire to survive. "Lieutenant, can we succeed?" asked Laroche, a veteran with a long scar across his face from the Battle of Austerlitz. "Those hot air balloons are watching us. We're being monitored every step of the way. We're not trying to escape. We're trying to send a distress signal," Pierre said, pulling out a map torn from the manual. The manual marks the main army's position, 30 kilometers to the northwest. The hot air balloons are their surveillance tools, but they're also our chance. If we can seize one and raise the 10th Army's flag, the main army will spot us. But what if the main army has orders to ignore us? Laroche asked, voicing the cruel truth. Pierre fell silent. He thought of the distorted words on the order, of the quartermaster's strange smile. He knew the possibility was high, but he couldn't give up, not when there was even a glimmer of hope for his men. Even if the main army doesn't come to our aid, we have to make them aware of what's happening here, Pierre said. his gaze unwavering. "We have to ensure future generations know the 10th Army didn't vanish in the swamp. They were betrayed by their own side. They began preparing in secret. LaRoche, a former balloonist, knew how to operate the devices. They gathered whatever materials they could. Pieces of uniform cloth to sew a flag, scrap weapon parts to fashion simple tools, even tin from the candy boxes, sharpened into blades. On the night before the Great Purge, Luke came to Pierre in tears. "Lieutenant, I ate a third candy," he sobbed. "I saw my mother again. She said I don't deserve to go home, that I should die in the swamp." Pierre pulled the young soldier into his arms, patting his back. "That's not your mother's voice, Luke," he said. "It's a lie woven with candies and hallucinations. Your sister is waiting for you. You have to survive to tell her the truth about what happened here." Luke wiped his tears and nodded. Pulling the tin candy box from his pocket, he emptied the contents onto the ground and crushed them under his boot. "I'll never believe their lies again," he said, his eyes hardening with resolve. Late that night, Pierre sat in his tent, writing in a journal. He used the acidic ink he had stolen from the secret police, knowing the words would fade soon. But he wrote anyway, painstakingly documenting the 10th Army's fate and the names of every soldier he could remember. "If anyone ever reads these words, I hope you will remember. We were not deserters, not cowards. We were soldiers of France, who fought for the Empire only to be betrayed by it. Snow melts, ink fades, but our blood will remain forever in this soil." After finishing, he hid the journal close to his chest. Then he picked up the flag they had sewn from cloth scraps, emblazoned with the 10th Army's number, crude, but striking in the candlelight. The night of the Great Purge arrived as scheduled. The blizzard had passed, leaving a clear, cold night sky with a crescent moon illuminating the desolate swamp. Suddenly, the metallic wail returned. 3 massive hot air balloons emerged from the clouds, their glowing wings lighting up the entire camp. "The purge has begun," Pierre shouted, drawing his sword. "Execute the plan." The soldiers, dully prepared, rushed out of their tents, splitting into 3 groups and charging toward the balloon moorings. The secret police and guards, caught off guard by the rebellion, fell into chaos. "Defend the balloons!" a secret policeman shouted, raising his pistol. A bullet grazed Pierre's shoulder, leaving a trail of blood. Ignoring the pain, he charged forward, running the man through with his sword. Luke and LaRoche raced toward the nearest balloon, where a guard was lighting an incendiary bomb, preparing to hurl it at the camp. "Drop the bomb!" Luke yelled, tackling the guard to the ground. LaRoche quickly untied the mooring ropes, and the balloon began to rise. "Hurry up!" LaRoche shouted, extending his hand. Pierre grabbed it, climbing into the basket. Several other soldiers followed. Luke was the last to board, his arm bleeding from a cut, but a smile on his face. Pierre unfurled the cloth flag, securing it to the edge of the basket. It fluttered in the night wind, the 10th Army's number clearly visible. "Look, it's our flag!" Luke shouted excitedly, pointing into the distance. On the horizon, the main army's camp came into view, its lights bright. They had clearly spotted the balloon. Pierre's heart raced, filled with hope that someone would recognize their distress signal. Suddenly, cannon fire erupted. Shells screamed toward the balloon, exploding beside the basket. The balloon's envelope was torn open, hot air rushing out as it began to plummet rapidly. "It's the main army firing," LaRoche shouted in despair. "They're shooting us down." Pierre's heart sank. He finally understood. The main army had long since received orders to erase the 10th Army completely, even if they sent a distress signal. As the balloon fell faster, the swamp rushing closer, Pierre pulled the journal from his tunic. Tearing out a page, he scribbled a brief plea for help. then tied the journal and note to the leg of a carrier pigeon, one he had secretly brought along, originally intended to send word to his family. "Fly," he whispered, releasing the bird. "Fly far away and tell the world the truth." The balloon crashed heavily on the edge of the swamp, the basket shattering as the soldiers were thrown out. Pierre's leg was pinned under a broken wooden pole, rendering him immobile. He stared at the main army's camp in the distance, its lights still burning bright. No one was coming to rescue them. Luke crawled over, trying to pull his leg free. "Lieutenant, we have to run. The Russians are coming." Pierre shook his head. He knew he couldn't escape. "Go, Luke," he said. "Survive. Tell others what happened here. Remember, the 10th Army is never forgotten." Luke nodded through his tears, then fled into the dark forest. Pierre lay on the cold swamp bank, staring up at the crescent moon, thinking of Marie and Lucy. He seemed to see Lucy's red balloon drifting into the night sky, shrinking into a tiny spark that I had finally pieced together the full truth. In 1812, after Napoleon's Grande Armée suffered a catastrophic defeat in Russia, the 10th Army, having learned too much about logistical corruption and command failures during the Moscow retreat, had become an embarrassment to the empire. To cover up the truth and consolidate his rule, Napoleon ordered Minister Savary's secret police to carry out an internal purification of the 10th Army. They used opium-laced candies and toys to exploit the soldiers' longing for their families, breaking their wills. They deployed massive hot air balloons to instill psychological terror, making the soldiers believe they were being punished by the Emperor's will. They used acidic ink to write orders and documents, ensuring the 10th Army's existence was erased from history forever. The soldiers driven into the swamp had not died in battle. They had been betrayed and murdered by their own country. I had organized all my research, the text restored under UV light, the Russian interrogation records, the tin toy soldier and child's drawing provided by Emily, the sample of self-erasing ink from the anonymous package, and my chemical analysis reports. I was ready to make everything public, to bring the 10th Army's truth to light. Just then, an elderly man claiming to be a Defense Ministry historical advisor arrived. Dressed in a tailored suit, his hair neatly combed, he wore a polite smile, appearing like a kindly scholar. His name was Lionel. "Mr. Leclerc, your research is impressive," he said, sitting across from me and tapping his fingers lightly on the desk. "But I must warn you, some truths are not meant to be made public. Truth is truth. There is no meant to be about it," I retorted. "The soldiers of the 10th Army were betrayed by their own country. Their story deserves to be known. Napoleon is a hero of France, a symbol of the nation." Lionel's smile faded, his voice growing cold. "His glorious history is a vital unifying force for the French people. If they learn he ordered the massacre of his own soldiers for the sake of the greater good, the country's entire value system will be shaken. Some truths destroy the glue that holds a nation together." He pulled a document from his briefcase and slid it across the desk. "This is a funding agreement. We will support you in any other research project you choose, providing the best resources and funding to make you one of France's top historians. In return, you will destroy all your materials on the 10th Army and never speak of this matter again." I looked at the agreement, then into Lionel's eyes. In them, I saw the same coldness as Savary's 2 centuries earlier, the same indifference to individual lives sacrificed for the greater good. He was no different from the men who had used candies, hot air balloons, and acidic ink to erase the 10th Army. I thought of Pierre Valentine, of his words in the journal. "We did not vanish in the swamp. We vanished in the Empire's memory." Now Lionel wanted me to be an accomplice, to let the 10th Army disappear into the swamp of history once more. I realized I was standing in the same moral swamp as Pierre. Would I choose silence, accepting a clean research project and a bright future? Or would I speak the truth, even in the face of unknown danger? The answer had long since been clear. Lionel seemed to read my mind. He put away the agreement, pulled a photograph from his inside pocket, and placed it on the desk. It showed a young girl with a bright smile, holding a tin toy soldier identical to the one on my desk. "This is your daughter, Alice, isn't it?" His voice held a subtle threat. "She's very happy at the bilingual kindergarten in the 7th arrondissement. Her teachers say she's an excellent artist. She always draws a soldier holding a balloon." My blood ran cold. I had never told anyone about my daughter. Lionel's investigation had been thorough. This was no mere warning. "What do you want?" I asked, my hands clenched into fists, my knuckles white. "I simply want to remind you that some choices affect more than just yourself," he said, standing up and adjusting his suit jacket. "You have 48 hours to consider. If you change your mind, call this number." He left a business card with only a phone number, no other details, and walked out of the repair room. After Lionel left, I collapsed into my chair. Alice's smile in the photograph felt like a knife in my chest. I thought of her begging me to tell Napoleon stories every night, of her tucking the tin toy soldier under her pillow as a guardian. If I insisted on making the truth public, would she be in danger? Lionel's influence was immense. I stood no chance against him. I picked up my phone, scrolling to my wife's number, my finger hovering over the call button. She had always supported my research, but her top priority was our family's safety. How could I explain any of this to her? Just then, the repair room door opened quietly. Maxime stood in the doorway, holding an old file folder, his expression grave. "I heard everything," he said, placing the folder on the desk. "This is something I've kept hidden for 20 years. It's time to pass it on." Inside was a yellowed investigation report, dated 1998, authored by Maxime himself. It detailed his own research into the 10th Army as a young man, including copies of additional prisoner interrogation records and a handwritten purge order signed by Savary, which stated explicitly, "The 10th Army has knowledge of logistical fraud and command failures during the Moscow retreat. Immediate disposal is ordered. All related documents are to be written in acidic ink and destroyed." In 1998, I found those faded letters, just like you did, Maxime said, sitting across from me, his eyes filled with remorse. "I followed the clues to Lionel's father, who was also a defense ministry advisor at the time. He threatened me with the same tactics. I had a newborn son, so I caved. I destroyed most of my research, keeping only these documents. For years, I've lived with guilt, watching those files gather dust in the archives, like watching the soldiers of the 10th Army sink slowly into the swamp." "Lionel mentioned my daughter," I said, my voice hoarse. "I know," Maxime replied, pulling a USB drive from his pocket. "This contains all the evidence I've collected over the years, including proof of the Lionel family's role in covering up this historical truth. I've contacted investigative journalists at Le Monde. They're willing to publish everything. As for your daughter, I've arranged for my nephew, a veteran, to protect her. He works as a security guard at her kindergarten." I stared at Maxime in shock. I had never expected the man who had warned me to know when to stop would stand with me at this critical moment. "Why are you helping me?" "To atone," he sighed. "I've stayed silent for 20 years. I can't let the 10th Army soldiers be forgotten any longer. Lionel thinks he can threaten us with our families, but he's forgotten. It's because of our families that we must defend the truth. If we can't face the darkness of our history, how can we teach our children to tell right from wrong?" Maxime's words woke me. I thought of Alice's drawings, of her earnest question, "Was Napoleon a hero?" I couldn't let her grow up in a lie, couldn't let her believe sacrificing individuals for the greater good was acceptable. I picked up Lionel's business card, tore it into pieces, and threw it in the trash. "I don't need 48 hours. My answer won't change," I said, looking at Maxime. "We'll make the truth public together." Maxime nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. The soldiers of the 10th Army can finally rest in peace. Pierre did not die. After the balloon crash, he was found by Russian troops and, along with a handful of other survivors, was sent to a Siberian labor camp. The winters here were colder than anything he had endured on the Berezina, -40-degree temperatures that turned breath to frost instantly. The camp's wooden barracks were drafty, the walls crusted with thick ice, and the soldiers were forced to work 12-hour days mining or from the frozen earth. A single misstep meant a beating from the guards. In his first month at the camp, Pierre fell seriously ill. Old lung wounds, aggravated by the bitter cold, left him coughing uncontrollably, blood streaking his sputum. Most of his fellow prisoners were too focused on their own survival to help, but a Russian peasant named Ivan secretly saved half his black bread for Pierre each day and warmed his feet with his own body heat. "Why are you helping me?" Pierre asked weakly. Ivan, imprisoned for resisting noble oppression, spoke no French. Pierre spoke no Russian. They communicated through gestures. Ivan pointed to the corner of Pierre's chest, where a portion of Lucy's photograph peeked out. He pulled a crumpled photo from his own pocket. A woman and 2 children, their smiles blurred. Pierre understood. They were both men with families, and longing for home was their only solace in this desolate place. With Ivan's care, Pierre gradually recovered. He began working alongside Ivan in the mines, secretly collecting specially colored plant sap while Ivan kept watch for guards, covering his actions. They dug a small hole in the corner of the barracks to hide the sap, sneaking it out at night after the guards fell asleep to mix into ink. The first time Pierre wrote Pierre Valentine on the wooden wall, his hand trembled violently. The ink was dark green, standing out sharply in the dim oil lamp light. He seemed to see himself in his uniform, Luke's excited smile, the scar on Laroche's face. "10th Army, never forgotten," he whispered, tears dripping onto the wood and smudging the ink. Ivan didn't understand what Pierre was writing, but he sat beside him each night, keeping watch. Once, a guard spotted the writing during an inspection and raised his whip to strike Pierre. Ivan suddenly lunged forward, tackling the guard's legs and shouting in Russian. Words Pierre couldn't understand, but which drew the guard's anger away. Pierre seized the chance to wipe the writing away with a damp cloth, narrowly escaping punishment. To repay Ivan, Pierre taught him French, while Ivan taught him Russian and how to identify the swamp plants used in the ink. Through their halting conversations, Pierre learned Ivan's hometown was near the Berezina River. In the winter of 1812, Ivan had seen the glowing giant birds in the sky and the bodies of soldiers floating in the swamp. Those soldiers were not enemies. They were poor men, Ivan said in broken French. Their families waited for them at home. Pierre's heart ached. He thought of Marie and Lucy, wondering if they believed him dead, if they had received the Empire's pension, money bought with the blood of soldiers. In the 5th year at the camp, Ivan fell ill with pneumonia, weakened by years of overwork. Pierre cared for him day and night, boiling his meager ration of black bread into porridge to feed him and wiping his body with the plant sap ink mixture. But Ivan's condition worsened. On his deathbed, he grasped Pierre's hand tightly and pressed a small wooden carving into it. A soldier holding a balloon, identical to Lucy's drawing. "For your daughter," Ivan said with his last breath. "She will wait for you to come home." After Ivan's death, Pierre kept the carving close to his chest, a symbol of the 10th Army's hope. He wrote the soldiers' names with even greater urgency, covering the barracks walls, his bedboard, even his tools. The guards grew accustomed to his madness and paid no more attention. Only Pierre knew. These names were the reason he kept living. One day, a new prisoner caught Pierre's eye. The young man, around 20 years old, bore a scar similar to Luke's. Pierre approached him, asking in Russian where he was from. "A small town outside Paris," the prisoner replied. "My grandfather was a soldier in the 10th Army, Luc Dupont. Pierre's body shook with excitement. "Luc is alive?" he asked, gripping the man's arm. The prisoner nodded, explaining that Luc had escaped the swamp, begging his way back to France only to find his family exiled by the Empire. Luc had lived in hiding until Napoleon's fall, then spent the rest of his life telling his family the 10th Army's story must never be forgotten. Tears streamed down Pierre's face. He pulled the wooden carving from his chest and handed it to the prisoner. "Please give this to Luc's family," he said. "Tell them Pierre Valentin never forgot them." The prisoner took the carving, nodding solemnly. He told Pierre that many people in France were now searching for the truth about the 10th Army, and one day the erased names would be remembered. Pierre never saw Luc again, nor did he know if the carrier pigeon had escaped the swamp. But he knew he must survive, must remember the name of every soldier in the 10th Army. In the labor camp, he had discovered a formula for ink similar to the acidic variety. Using sap from special swamp plants mixed with a pinch of sulfur, he could create a writing fluid that faded over time. He collected the materials in secret, writing the 10th Army soldiers' names on the camp's wooden planks day after day. Pierre Valentin, 3rd Battalion Lieutenant. Luc Dupont, Private. Laroche Martin, Veteran. He wrote from sunrise to sunset, the words fading after a few weeks, leaving the wood blank as if he had never touched it. But he didn't care. He would write them again over and over. The other prisoners thought he was crazy. The guards mocked him, but he never stopped. He knew the names would fade like ink stains, but as long as he remembered them, the 10th Army would never truly disappear. In his 10th year at the camp, Pierre fell seriously ill. On his deathbed, lying on the cold wooden planks, he looked up at the names he had just written on the ceiling and smiled. He seemed to see Lucy, holding her red balloon emblazoned with the 10th Army's flag, soaring over the skies of Paris. "Snow melts, ink fades," he whispered, "but the earth remembers every drop of blood." I had refused Lionel's deal. He had left with a dark scowl, saying nothing, but I knew this was only the beginning. I might lose my job at the archives, might face pressure from the authorities, but I had no regrets. Over the next 2 days, Maxime and I organized the materials while journalists from Le Monde secretly visited the archives to verify the evidence. We divided the documents into 2 parts. One set to be published by the journalists, the other encrypted and uploaded to the International League of Historians server, ensuring the truth would not be erased even if disaster struck. The day before the scheduled release, my office was suddenly sealed off on charges of suspected leakage of state secrets. 2 uniformed men entered, seizing my laptop and all my research materials. The emblem on their sleeves matched the one on Lionel's business card. "Mr. Leclerc, please come with us," the leader said coldly, leaving no room for argument. Maxime stepped in front of me, pulling out his identification. "I am a senior archivist here. These materials are public historical records. There is no leakage of state secrets." "Mr. Maxime, we have orders to take only Mr. Leclerc," the leader said, glancing at him. "I advise you not to interfere, or you will face the consequences." I patted Maxime's shoulder, signaling him to stand down. "I'll go with them," I said. I knew this was Lionel's counterattack. He wanted to silence me before the truth could be revealed. I was held in solitary confinement for over 10 hours. No light, no windows, only a cold metal table and chair. When Lionel pushed open the door, I had almost lost track of time. He held a cup of coffee, placing it in front of me. "It's not too late to change your mind," he said, sitting across from me. "Sign a statement saying your research was fabricated, and I'll let you go immediately. Your family will be safe." I stared at the coffee, thinking of the hot drink Maxime had given me, of Alice's smile. "I won't sign anything," I said. "The truth has been uploaded to the server. It will be released automatically in 48 hours. You can't stop it." Lionel's face turned livid. He stood abruptly, splashing the coffee in my face. "Do you think those servers are safe? I will erase all traces of this, just like the 10th Army," he shouted, his voice filled with anger and madness. At that moment, the door burst open. A police officer entered, handing Lionel an arrest warrant. "Mr. Lionel, you are under arrest on charges of threats and abuse of power." Lionel froze, staring at the warrant in disbelief. "This is impossible. Do you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are," the detective said coldly. "All your actions have been documented. The evidence is irrefutable." Maxime had anticipated Lionel's move, installing hidden recording devices in the repair room that had captured every word of Lionel's threats. Meanwhile, Le Monde had published excerpts of the evidence ahead of schedule, sparking widespread public outrage and forcing the presidential palace to order a full investigation. As I walked out of the interrogation room, I saw Maxime and my wife standing in the doorway. Alice rushed into my arms, clutching the tin toy soldier tightly. "Daddy, you're a hero, just like the soldiers in your stories." I lifted her up, tears blurring my vision. "Daddy isn't a hero. The soldiers who died in the swamp are the heroes." Late that night, I returned to the archives repair room, empty with only the UV lamp casting a faint glow. I turned on the computer, encrypting and uploading all my research to the Public International League of Historians server, setting it to release automatically in 48 hours. The title read, "Snow melts, ink fades, but the earth remembers every drop of blood." As the upload completed, I let out a long breath. I seemed to see Pierre Valentine, writing names on the labor camp's wooden planks. I seemed to see the soldiers of the 10th Army, smiling down at me. I walked to the window, holding the tin toy soldier. The engraving 10th Army, never forgotten, glinted in the moonlight. Outside, snow was falling, soft, silent flakes covering the streets of Paris, just like the winter of 1812. Maxime appeared in the doorway, holding a cup of hot coffee. "When I was young, I wanted to uncover this secret too," he said, his voice hoarse. "But I was afraid. I chose silence. You are braver than me." I took the coffee, warmth spreading from my hands to my chest. "It's not bravery," I said. "It's the soldiers who gave me courage. They left traces of the truth with their lives. I only found them." Maxime nodded, turning to leave. I was alone in the repair room, the snow falling harder outside. I whispered the final line of Pierre's journal, the line I had pieced together from the faded documents, the last message the 10th Army had left for the world. "We did not vanish in the swamp. We vanished in the Empire's memory. But forgetting itself will eventually become another kind of monument. Snow melts, ink fades, but the erased names, the betrayed souls, will leave an eternal mark in the river of history. All we can do is remember them, ensuring that forgetting never becomes one final injustice." With Lionel's arrest, the truth about the 10th Army was finally revealed to the world. Le Monde's special report caused a sensation, sparking commemorative events across France. The Paris Military Archives opened a dedicated 10th Army exhibition, where the faded letters, tin toy soldier, and replica of Pierre's journal became the most poignant exhibits. On the exhibition's opening day, I stood in front of the journal replica, staring at the words written in acidic ink. I seemed to see Pierre writing on the labor camp's wooden planks. An elderly man approached, holding a wooden carving of a soldier with a balloon. "I am Jean Dupont, Luc Dupont's great-grandson," he said, handing me a photograph. It showed Luc with a young girl holding the same wooden carving. "This was left to our family by Mr. Pierre Valentine. My great-grandfather cherished it, saying one day someone would come with the truth about the 10th Army." I looked at the carving, tears welling up again. This was the statue Ivan had made for Pierre, the token Pierre had sent to Luc's family. After 200 years, it had finally found its way back to us. Mr. Pierre never forgot the soldiers of the 10th Army, Jean Dupont said. He wrote their names countless times in the labor camp. After my great-grandfather Luc returned to France, he spent his life searching for other survivors. Just like Mr. Pierre, he guarded the truth in his own way. I handed Jean Dupont the tin toy soldier. Emily gave this to me. It belongs with your family now. Jean Dupont took the toy soldier, placing it beside the wooden carving. Snow melts, ink fades, but memory endures, he said softly. The soldiers of the 10th Army have finally come home. After the exhibition, I took Alice to the Berezina River. In winter, the river was frozen solid, the distant swamp covered in snow, silent and still. I knelt down, pointing to the swamp. Many heroes are buried here, I told her. They gave their lives for the truth. Alice pulled a drawing from her pocket. A group of soldiers holding balloons, with the words, 10th Army, never forgotten, written on them. Daddy, I want to bury this here, so the heroes know we remember them. Together, we dug a small hole in the snow, placing the drawing inside. Snowflakes fell on us, like a white blanket covering the fallen soldiers. On the way home, Alice fell asleep in my arms, clutching the wooden carving tightly. I looked out the window at the snow-covered landscape, remembering Pierre's final words. We did not vanish in the swamp. We vanished in the Empire's memory. But forgetting itself will eventually become another kind of monument. Yes, forgetting is a monument, but remembering is an even greater one. The erased names, the betrayed souls, have gained eternal life through our memory. Like the ink stains in the snow, even if they fade temporarily, they will eventually reappear in the light of history, clear and unyielding.